I think there's like a moment here of cleaning up a little bit, right? This pause as Ixtabor, starts taking this haul of Tarnanas, from bundled up in the sheet, down in the hold to do whatever he needs to do to start, preserving or otherwise like storing them in the cargo hold. And there is, just to kind of like refresh where we're at, right? We are kind of parked. The ship is anchored at the kind of mouth of this valley that has opened up in the Thrash, the kind of upper layer of the Wildsea. And it's like kind of in this little valley where you have anchored to get this initial haul. We took 1 damage, I think, to your saws here, just because they've been gunked up with like the spilt Tarnana peels and this kind of like oozing vanilla scented black ichor that is the inside of the fruit. I think Claremont's like excited and happy. This is like a fun, pleasant, like kind of first event on your journey, but also his beautiful cream color suit is in shambles already, proven ill-suited for the exploration of the Wildsea. And so, just to review, you've taken 2 marks on your journey track because you forged ahead here. And the journey track, as a reminder, is like the measure of the full length of how long it is going to take you to get to your final destination. Your final destination in this case being the bustling freeport of Caldermere. The total number of boxes on this track is, of course, hidden to you. You might have 1 left, you might have 12 left, but probably not 12. 12 is a really long journey.
Yeah, it's a really...
So there's an unknown number of these left. And I'll broadcast this again so you guys can see it. But you have 2 boxes marked on a 5-box track called the Growing Rootquakes. And this is, obviously related to the rootquakes that are happening. As it progresses, you'll start to see more signs of it. And when this track fully fills, something will happen. And so this is kind of a danger track or like a progress track that is going to be kind of passing or growing as time passes alongside it. But, I think you've gotten the haul. You've started to kind of clean the deck up enough to make it like safe to be out there again. And we are going to keep going on this journey. The kind of like flow of the Wildsea here is these, these journeys where it's the person at helm is going to make a choice. We're going to see how far we can get. We're going to roll to see what kind of encounters we meet along the way until we finally make it to the destination that we're trying to get to, or we get sidetracked enough that our destination is changed. Let's talk about where we guys want to do next on this journey. We can kind of abstract this a little bit, right? We don't have to go moment by moment here, but the kind of same set of options that you had before is going to be available to you again, right? There are 5 roles. 2 of them are essential. 1 person has to be at the helm, controlling the ship's speed and direction. Another person will have to be on watch, rolling to see what the ship is about to encounter as the journey progresses. And then there are 3 alternative options for anyone who's not doing essential work: tending the engine, cartographizing, keeping a lookout for landmarks and distinctive places, or watching the weather, gaining some idea of what future weather conditions will be like based on your meteorological and environmental assessments. And so to reset the scene, it's like midday. I think it's a clear sky. There's a relative quiet on the Wildsea in the aftermath of this rootquake. I think that, all of the shaking and the kind of like uproar, there's like an immediate uproar that follows a rootquake, and then a kind of calm as much of the life on the Wildsea kind of pauses a moment to see what will happen next before resuming the kind of cycle of their daily activity. And maybe even, we're starting to hear a little bit of that noise picking up again, right? The bird song is starting to filter back in. The chittering insects are rising in chorus once more.
I guess I have a question, and if it's, I guess mechanically, is with like rootquakes, does that give any indication to weather at all? Like, is that something that we know about the Wildsea, that like rootquakes happen when, like, I don't know, temperatures are rising or dropping, or There's not a known link to that or anything.
Um,
Just as we go forward, I just was thinking like,
I think it's one of those things where probably some people think so,
right,
right?
okay, yeah,
Uh, but I don't think that there's like an established, one for one.
sure,
When it gets hot, rootquakes happen, or when it gets cold, whatever.
sure.
I do think that if this could be a moment if someone wanted to try and make a roll to like, uh, study this kind of thing or like assess what's going on. I think there's like,
Yeah, I think Hex just being on the ship and looking at all of our panels of various different, barometer readings and stuff, just wants to check, and that can go forward with the part of the journey where checking the weather. So
mm-hmm.
yeah, I can roll for something like that just to get a sense of what might be going on. That sounded way dumber when I said it out loud. Like, does weather affect earthquakes? But then I realized they are trees, and that
Right?
does
Yeah.
maybe has more than like thinking like, oh, it's hot today. Is there going to be an earthquake?
Yeah, I think that this could just be an action roll right now. If you are you trying to assess like, I guess there's two ways that this could go.
Mm-hmm.
You could take like an action roll right now for in a more immediate like, am I noticing any kind of correlation in the moment?
Uh-huh.
Alternatively, if this is like part of a bigger scientific question that Hexam has,
Mm-hmm.
this might be better suited as what the game likes to refer to as a project. And projects are kind of like a thing that you work on in your downtime.
Okay.
When the crew has a chance to rest, or when you're in a port, or otherwise you have these kind of moments of reprieve. A project, is a way that you can kind of work on something that's a little bigger than just answering an immediate question.
Yeah, let's call it a project then. As part of a larger study of exploring what is out there on the Wildsea.
So working on a project would be part of a task.
Mm-hmm.
And tasks are kind of the thing that you get to do. It's worth talking about it a little bit here. The game splits itself into kind of like three intertwined but also kind of separate modes of play. There is the journey, which is what we've just been doing. There is the scene, which is what we kind of just came into or just are coming out of right now, is where we kind of bring the camera in for an explicit encounter with a thing. And then the game also has us use montages. And montages are, these kind of like slightly more zoomed out moments in the game. They are not exclusively, but they are in a lot of ways. We played Beam Saber last season. I think everyone here has played some like Blades in the Dark before. It is what those games like would refer to as downtime, but it's a little bit more spread out across the entirety of the game than it is in those other games. It's kind of interwoven between. And so when you're on the ship, the way that you get kind of a montage, a chance to do this, right? Because otherwise we're busy. You're too kind of busy journeying to work on a project, right? But instead of the person at the helm choosing to forge ahead or to find a path, you guys can choose to set anchor. And setting anchor, in the overall broader scheme of the game, you're setting anchor multiple times a night or whatever, right? You're sleeping, but when we choose to mechanically drop anchor as like a narrative choice, it means that we are giving the characters this time to work on tasks, to have like a little montage moment before we resume our journey on the Wildsea. This is also a great time to try and repair the ship or heal some injury to yourself, or if you think that our destination is going to be a place that is going to lead to a more dangerous encounter, it's a chance to work on an invention or craft a weapon or some kind of armor or bomb. Bomb BALM, but also bomb BOMB, depending on what you think might happen. So I guess as the crew is kind of not recovering, it makes it sound like you had a bad time, but as the crew is getting things back together in the wake of finding these Tarnanas and this little grove here. I guess that's my question is, are we setting off immediately on a journey, or does this feel like a moment where the crew does want to drop anchor and take some time to kind of prepare before they journey ahead?
Are these edible?
Hernanas?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, they are. Okay.
Ixtobor, I think explicitly, I think you saw him like a cheerful, like, that cheerful wooden grin, those big teeth it's showing as he's collecting them.
Yeah.
These are a delicacy. They're delicious. They make excellent desserts. And so I think he's already thinking about like Tarnana custard tarts, right? That's like what he's thinking about as he's starting to haul them downstairs. And there's probably like at one point like a loud banging down the stairs as like him or Claremont slip on a Tarnana peel on the way down.
I think like Calithiel's at the pilot berth, and probably like snacking on one of these, freshly collected Tarnanas.
Yeah.
I just want to talk
it's like
to
a Go-Gurt, right? It's the
Really young,
interior's
but it
so
sounds
I think
good.
like you're like
I'm sucking down Tarnanas up in the pilot berth, and I'm calling out. I guess if he's kind of making the rounds, right? It's like Montclair, Captain.
and Montclair's I think dabbing like with a rag at like one of the many like kind of dark splotches on his suit. Calithiel. I think he looks to the saw, right? The saw blade that I think is covered in this dripping ichor from like where it has like hewn up like the vines holding the Tarnanas and the peels, right? And I think he looks to that and he looks to you, and he says, "What do you think? Are we safe to push on ahead?"
It's a sticky situation, Captain. But we're, I think, clear to go. This rootquake, though, have you passed this way before?
And a sheepish smile. This is Claremont's first time on the Wildsea, which I think he said, but maybe like
Slid by it.
less explicit than he needs to have been. My father's fleets have sent many trading vessels through the shaking bows to Caldermere. We're not on an unbeaten path. Why do you ask?
Well, these rootquakes tend to accompany something happening below. Would your father perhaps have had any charts of the area that you maybe read? He read these charts to you as a boy?
I think for the sake of like starting this out, I don't think we have a chart for this area.
Okay.
I think some of you guys have charts that you started with in your inventory, and as we kind of continue to play through the game, I'm happy to like just for us to like make the call that like actually this chart where I have right now applies to this area that we're in. But for the sake of this journey, I'm going to say that none of the charts that we have on us are for this specific journey. And then from that point, once we get to Caldermere and forward, those ones that you have that are kind of undeclared are like open for, kind of declaring in the fiction, like, oh, I think, Calithiel, you have a cryptic map, right? That's I think a chart that you have. So before a journey at some point in the future, if you want to call out like the cryptic map is for this area,
Sure.
we can kind of define it that way. But I think for the case of this, I think, you have the charts that, broadly speaking, you're following to get to Caldermere, right? You know the vague idea of where you're going to. You have that much, but you don't have anything that's going to give you any further mechanical help than you've gotten already. And I think, Claremont here would say, the rootquakes are a blessing and a curse. You're right, Calithiel. There is something happening below. They're going to shake up, hopefully, the discovery that will let me put together the final pieces of my own theories to finish my work. But as much as they shake up, so too do they change the lanes of the sea. Look ahead of us already, and he points to the valley you're in. My father spoke to me many times of these. A journey that should be a straight line can become meandering in the aftermath of a rootquake. They change the topography of the seas themselves.
Yeah, and I think even as we're looking out across this valley, you can hear the weird, like, this croaking songs of, like, the frog birds, flocking tree to tree. I can see it in my, view from the pilot berth.
How
and
much...
I think...
Sorry, I have a question. How does... So Calithiel grew up in a city far below the waves and was lost from it by a rootquake, right? Does the rest of the crew know that? Like, to the... Like, have you told them your origin story? You know what I mean?
I don't necessarily think so, because Calithiel knows he's sort of a odd duck out here. Not a lot of...
He's a duck?
No, there not a lot of Karchabora isopod types walking around. So
Yep.
I think he's also kind of been on the Wildsea before, but never really in a boat this small. I think probably just chartering around or getting stuck from one free port to the other. And I think, even kind of like stretching out, having finished this Tarnana, I think cracks like 6 sets of knuckles, right? It's like, well, I see 2 courses of action. One, while we're down anchor here, we could delve, find something below, because rootquakes mean salvage. So we are stopped here. We could look beneath the waves, or we push on to Caldermere here and press the engine.
I think Claremont looks around the ship, right? Hexam and Reese, you're both on the deck here. I think he puts it as a wider question to the crew. He looks to each of you. What's the call here?
Nothing wrong with taking a moment to get our bearings straight, see what's below. I can run through the all the specs, I guess, of what we might see coming up weather-wise. But other than that, Caldermere seems to be on the horizon, so to say. So.
Caldermere isn't going anywhere. I have been very curious to see you ply your trade. This delving seems very
Dangerous?
dangerous. Yes.
You'd be right.
How safely you can do it. Fascinating stuff. If you can't tell, I'm still trying to find his voice. We're gonna get there, I promise.
So it sounds like we are going to drop anchor. And so dropping anchor is one of the 3 choices that the crew member who is at the helm can make. They can choose to cut a path, which is just kind of keeping the ship going at a safe and steady speed across the treetops. They can forge ahead, which is what we did last time. Your passage across the waves is rough but swift, the roar of the engines and the cracking of branches heralding your arrival. Or you can drop anchor. And narratively, what dropping anchor means is that the ship stops so everyone on board can rest with minimal fear of interruption. The undercrew will take over watch duties, keeping their eyes out for dangers to the ship. This is the safest way to spend the nighttime hours and a great opportunity to work on personal projects and ship repairs. And what it means mechanically is that the crew has time to take a montage while the ship is at rest. The undercrew will keep watch for danger, and no other rolls will be rolled. I mentioned montages a second ago, but I want to kind of revisit that idea really quickly and talk about what that looks like here. Because we are dropping anchor, you guys are going to have time for a little montage. And the montage is, like I said, it's the chance to rest, to work on things that require more attention than you can give them while the boat is in motion and you have to be ready to respond to a crisis at a moment's notice. Montages allow our crew to benefit from one of the most useful tropes of the big screen, the condensing of long periods of time into short but narratively useful snapshots. And so during this montage, everybody's going to get a moment of focus to get one thing done, which can kind of allow us to split off and kind of allow us to zoom out a little bit and get a sense of what these characters are doing with a little bit more time. And there are kind of 4 categories of activity, really 5, that the crew might take here. But before I give you these narrow windows, I just want to talk a little bit of what a montage might look like, right? It could be taking time to work on a personal project. It could be tending to your recent injuries. It can be exploring the streets of a new port to find a local business or a good-looking eatery. It can also be meditating in silence, trying to kind of recover your own inner balance. It can be any of these little moments that are outside of the scope of the usual immediate danger. But a lot of these are going to end up breaking down into one of these 4 tasks. Exploration, which is a chance for a character to track down a particular individual or service, or to discover routes, or look around an area in a kind of slower, less hurried manner than they would in a scene. Acquisition, which could be delving to scavenge around for bits of old stone or rusted machinery. It could also be, if we were in a free port, going to trade with someone, trying to buy something or to acquire something in a different way. It could be recovery, which is like it sounds, is healing. It is repairing the ship or repairing yourself. Creation. And creation is, it's the crafting mini game. It's your opportunity to make things. As this game goes on, you guys are all going to be acquiring lots of salvage and specimens. Things like fresh tarnanas, or lengths of chain, or gizmos and bits and bobs. All of you have already started with some of these bits of salvage and specimens. The creation task is your chance to turn them into something, right? It could be making a food or a alchemical concoction or inventing some kind of gizmo or weapon. But each of these will become a kind of temporary resource that you'll have access to. It can provide a benefit in some way. And so in this game, doing something like cooking is not just like a bit of flavor. It can also be literally like a mechanical thing that will bolster your character's success on the Wildsea or assist your allies.
Like Breath of the Wild.
Yeah.
The fifth mode here is projects, right? Which can be involved in any four of these activities, but projects are tasks that fall outside of the time scale of a single montage. Things like writing a book, assembling a complex machine, learning a language. These are projects, multi-stage tasks that are completed over the course of several montages. And so whenever you have time to perform a task during a montage, you can choose to work on a project instead. And so the emergency anchors were dropped before, but like having decided to stay here for the rest of the eve to kind of drop anchor and take some time to look at the ship and yourselves, I imagine there's like a more thorough anchoring process that happens, right? Like things that deploy more slowly but are like more secure. As the ship sort of settles in. And we can kind of zoom out, but each of you have the kind of time here to take one task during this montage. It sounds like you maybe have something in mind already, Pete, Caliphio, and same for you, Hexam. It seems like this weather thing, right, is maybe what you're interested in doing. Yeah, so who wants to kind of talk about what they're doing first? Like let's... like I said, I think there's a quieting of the rhythm of the ship as, the engines are brought down to like kind of like lower like standby mode, right? Enough to power the technology of the ship, but like, you're not firing direct power to the engine or to the bite anymore.
Yeah, we can't have the voltage go cold. The batteries are a slow hum. Reese, if you're interested, do you want to go beneath the waves here and explore?
Yes, I believe I already told you that.
Great. Well, in my mind, maybe this is like, we haven't really seen the anchor drop before. So, maybe part of this is like the anchor is, like what's an anchor like in the Wildsea? So I imagine it's like a sort of complex, contraption.
Like
that
Doc
I think
Ock arms. Like
I'm imagining something like that, right? Where there's sort of like grapnel points. That can probably grip onto a couple of branches. I think last time we talked about them a little bit as like the kind of crane attachment you'd see that like picks up pipes, like sort of like a claw shape. And maybe there's a piece in that that's almost like a descender, right? Where there's like the actual weight of the anchor that would hold the ship into place is something, descends still from like a winch or a pulley. But maybe there's like a place to step onto, like a sort of like at the cross beam on an anchor, you can sort of like put your feet somewhere and hold, a handheld or something on the line.
Oh, as it descends.
Yeah, so you can sort of like ride it down as the anchor points are finding their spot. And maybe that's sort of what we're seeing here. There's like because we have the bay doors right on the bottom of the Verdigale. And so maybe that's like sort of attached to the berth where this your Scooty Puff Jr. drops out of.
That kind of scares me. Ugh. Going beneath the waves. We haven't done that really. Ooh.
Yeah, I imagine like this bay door that we have. One of the most striking things as it opens, right, is like it's opening to a much darker scene than above you, right? You're still kind of like in the thrash, dipping down into the tangle.
This is like when you start descending into like the ocean, ocean ROV stuff. Like the light gets dimmer the deeper you go. Like there's a gradual shift in the shadow.
So let's talk about, what you're doing here. Zoom out slightly to talk about like what's the task or like the kind of what's the thing you're going to try and do.
Well, Califiel knows these rootquakes churn, right? They churn stuff up, whether that's salvage or wrecks or ruins, sometimes treasures of the old world, sometimes something more dangerous. But I think curiosity is largely what's motivating me here, right? And like Califiel has a weird relationship with rootquakes, and so I think part of that is like, well, maybe this could be the one, right, where he can find his way back or something. So I think he's sort of compelled a little bit. And as we descend here, I'm looking for the telltale signs of, I think, salvageable cargo from a rootquake, which usually I think takes the place of, as we're, I think, descending down, right? Like, you move through the canopy, the foliage of undergrowth, and you get past the point where there's all the leaves, because the leaves are always reaching up for the sunlight, and you're in this kind of like stick bramble, right? This is like the bottom half of like bushes or shrubs where it's like it's just kind of more open and maybe a little more brittle. And this is where you'd start to see bits of, I don't know, like rusted metal or screws and washers or something in the tangle when there's such a upturn.
Yeah. I would say, the other thing I would say is that I think there is still a lot of green here. Even below, like, there is still a density of vegetation in the Wildsea. Like, the tangle it's not until you're getting even lower, like, towards the sink that you start to lose this greenery, which is, like, a deeper dive than I think you're probably making solo without, like,
like a submersible.
Or like, an expedition, right?
So I think maybe given, not to detract, I think there is still a lot of green here, but I think something about the flora has shifted, right? Maybe it's more like kudzu or hanging moss or something.
Oh, yeah.
As we
I mean,
come lower.
This place is crisscrossed with, like, vines and, like, because the Wildsea is not just the trees, which is, I think, an important thing to note, right? The Wildsea is infrastructurally buoyed up. It's the trees make the base of it, but it is overgrown with parasitic plants that have like rooted themselves into the iron root and have fed on the crezerin and gone wild. And so it is this tangled mass of vegetation that extends just beyond the actual leaves of the iron root trees. But yes, like this like kudzu-like overgrowth of vines, right? And there's stuff in the air. There are
like spores,
right?
Ooh.
Almost always. And it's not heavy enough right now that I think you're like in danger, but it is always a danger in the Wildsea. There's a deep fungal growth. There's the smell of like decay and rot, and also like fresh growth all alongside it, right? And it's like later in the day.
What you're talking about, yeah.
It's hot down here, right? Everything above has been cooking in the sun all day, and that old heat has like leached its way down below, and also the moisture gets trapped. It's damp and dense. You know what I mean? Like when you go under, there's a sense of
smells
truly
like soil. Yeah.
And in that same way, also, I think as that line spins down and you guys start to make your way down, it's quieter. The sound is kind of dampened and muffled by the mass of vegetation around you. There were birds you could hear when you were above deck that you can no longer hear down here. But there are new calls emanating from below.
And I think as we're, pirouetting our way down, Reese and I, Califiel, I imagine where we're holding this is sort of like, it's almost like we're on a subway, right? Like you're holding like the center pole or something as we're on our way down. And I think would ask you, right? Like, Reese, have you been below the waves before?
No.
You're going to need to keep your senses sharp.
My senses are always sharp, Cal.
Can I have a trait, being a pillbug Carchibora, that I have a series of liquid-filled canals beneath my skin, allowing me to sense minute vibrations. I can mark to hone in on a specific vibration and learn its location, but can I like sort of sense what's around as we're making our way down?
Yeah, I think you can sense, as you're making your way down that there's still like these faint aftershocks, like, right? Like echoing and like rippling through the waves. Like, the bulk of the rootquake has died down, but it has set off a chain of motion that means there is kind of this swaying to everything down here. Because we are in a montage, I do want to like zoom out a little bit here and like do a kind of a bigger roll for what you're trying to do. And then maybe we can move into a scene if it feels like we need it.
Okay.
You know, kind of slightly more zoomed out scope that I've used of like a longer action.
Okay.
So let's talk about like what you're doing with Reese. Like it sounds like acquisition, right? You said you're looking for salvage. Mm-hmm. And so this is going to be a roll still. This will be, you know, a roll like we would do for any kind of action, except that instead we're kind of seeing if you're able to find something interesting down here, right? While you're scavenging. Let's talk about like what the role for Calithiel doing this is, because you're kind of showing Reese the ropes during this time, right? Is that kind of the idea? Like you're...
Yeah. Because I can hear it in my head, like the insects humming in the branches, like there are these strange calls further out. Part of this is like I'm showing Reese what to look out for, because we have to keep your senses up. And then, you know, what do we see is essentially my question. Like, what do we see down here in terms of, you know, whether that's like the hull of some overturned ship or maybe, I don't know. So I've got, you know, like delve would be to dust remnants, but I don't think we're quite there necessarily.
So the way that we start for an action roll is first that we're going to start with your edge. What edge are you using here?
Tides.
And tides is what is tides? You know,
Tides is an edge of exploration, learning, and lore. And so even if I think I was maybe testing Montclair a little bit, because Calithiel's probably not going to go into anywhere without any kind of insight. But this is like a known, I think, like rootquake region. Caldermere famously is a port that bustles because of its proximity to these rootquakes and producing a rich vein. So at your best, relying on your knowledge of the waves, the quirks and secrets of the Wildsea that others might write off as mere folk tales. And I think Caldermere's like a sort of legendary status precedes itself here. Yeah.
So you're starting with tides, and then we move on to skills, and you can use a skill here. Each skill is up to 3 ranks. Tides is going to give you 1 dice to start. So what skill do you think you're using here?
I think delve. This sounds like we're sort of traversing barriers and hopefully unearthing secrets.
Yeah, I think
or
delve,
maybe.
Yeah, delve I think makes sense here because we are zooming out, right? This is not like we're not rolling to see if Calithiel can like get off the rope and into the trees. We're rolling to see what Calithiel comes up with.
Yep.
You know, a couple hours probably below the waves searching. And so there's like some delving there for sure. And then the last one here is, do you have an advantage? So right now you have 2 in delve. So that plus your tides puts you at 3d6. And is there an advantage you could apply here? Is Reese helping you? Is Reese enough of a help that he could be an advantage?
Maybe a hindrance. This guy doesn't know what he's doing. He's never been down here before. But I have the benefit of one of these traits, these lateral lines that sort of give me like a sense organ, essentially, where darkness has no effect on my ability to perceive my surroundings. So even if it's dark here, I think like Calithiel has weird, probably compound bug eyes. Probably doesn't see like a normal person, but can kind of feel the surroundings as we move into the underbrush.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. So that'll be 1 more, so that'll be 5d6 altogether. And this is not a roll that necessarily like a failure means like a bad thing happens to you. It's more about seeing like, do you find stuff, right? This is like a little bit less dangerous than what we'd be doing if we were like exploring an active ruin.
Okay. All right, I'm going to roll 5. Is there a cut or no? No cut. Because
there's not a cut here because I think this is, like I said, pretty low stakes, right? Okay. Yeah. It's not like you landed on a site of like obvious salvage and you're like digging in there. This is just kind of like poking around to see what's down below the waves right where you're happening to get.
I got a 5, a 4, a 1, and a 2.
And you have got a twist. There's 2 1s there. And so whenever there are 2 of the same number in a roll, that is what the game calls a twist. We saw that with the Tarnan appeal, right? The twist there ended up being that you got so many that they were splattering on the deck and gumming up the works, as it were. A twist here on acquisition means that the resource that you find is going to have like a unique tag or like a positive tag. But a 5 is a triumph. Or sorry, not a triumph. It's a conflict. normally the way acquisition works on a conflict, a 4 or a 5, what other games might call a mixed success, your resource would come with a negative tag, right? So it might be fragile, or it might be rusty, or it might be rotting, right? If it's a specimen. I think the twist here is probably going to mean that like we'll kind of cancel each other out. There's not going to be a negative tag per se, but there's going to be an interesting one. We can kind of like figure out exactly what you salvage as we talk through this.
Okay.
So I think, this is an afternoon spent kind of carefully picking your way through the undergrowth surrounding the ship. And because, again, this is like, it's this montage, it's this task, it's like not a full-blown expedition. I don't imagine that you're going too far away from where you are anchored. One, because it's also dangerous and difficult to do, because as you move away from like the platform that has been lowered, we talked about Krezerin a little bit already, but Krezerin is this kind of mutative sap that leaks out of the branches and leaves of the ironroot trees. It is the thing that enables the rapid and rampant regrowth of plant life all across the Wildsea, and it is also caustic to the touch. It burns people to touch it, to come in contact with it, and to touch it for longer periods of times can lead to the same kind of like mutative effect that it has on plants, right? People are changed by long-term Krezerin exposure. There are tons of myths and legends about monsters on the Wildsea, and who knows how many of them are actually encounters with like lost crewmates who've been lost in the Krezerin and changed into something else. And so as you climb, there's like a skill to moving in a way that avoids touching Krezerin whenever possible, right? That avoids getting it on your clothes, that avoids this kind of like accidental exposure. You can't just like walk across the treetop sea because you will be burnt by Krezerin, and before too long, it will become too much. And so there is a real like trying to scout out where there is dead growth too, where there is like as few leaves across the thing as possible to move safely past it.
And maybe that's like where this anchor comes to rest or something. It's like you see it in like pine barrens, especially where like the branches will kind of overlap hard enough where just falling detritus sort of collects and dries out. Like there's sort of a mass of something. Like where are we standing, I guess, when the anchor drops?
I think that, like this one, probably, like it tangles itself into a mess of branches that like are sturdy enough to kind of lock it in place. And I think you've got others that are shooting at like cross angles, from the other, like along the bottom of the ship to keep it in place. And so I think as this like afternoon of exploration goes on, you're not like in an area that is full and profuse of salvage. You know what I mean? You're dropping into a random area and seeing what's there. And I think eventually, as you kind of climb, I think the easiest way to move is probably towards the rift that has opened, right? That's the most open kind of pathway in the dense foliage.
What does a rootquake look like down here? Does it sort of, like, can we see where the, trunks of ironwoods are sort of splitting apart?
I don't think so, because you're not in the epicenter, right? You are like on the far edge of a rootquake.
Right.
What you can see is that, like I said, things have not stopped moving. There's still kind of a shifting. And so I think part of like what you have to do is be very careful as you move to not get like, lost in the motion and then thrown spinning down to far below.
Okay.
But eventually what this brings you to, I think, is that like kind of below that valley, you start to see broken up wood that is not raw. It is processed wood. It is, boards. It is structure. And, maybe, I don't know if it's with Reese's help or with his hindrance, Calithiel. Eventually you manage to find it's kind of accumulated in this like nest of branches that are crisscrossing, much like the anchor is a little bit further away. I think you can see how the Tarnanas got here. There are the remains of old walking platforms and, I think like busted open barrels filled with like long rancid and fermented like Tarnana, like, it is, this used to be a farm.
Interesting.
At some point, it's probably been a while, right? But like, it was broken. And I don't know if it's clear to you right away whether that was because something else happened here or if it's because of these rootquakes themselves that have broken this farming thing, but there's no immediate sign of life. There's no sign of like, there are not farmers here. There are not farmers' bodies still here, at least not that you see right away, but there are the remnants of their tools and trade.
Interesting. Okay.
Do you think that if I ate the bananas, the rotten bananas, I would get a buzz?
I think it's past like fermented. I mean, I think it's like now like a paste in there, like a.
Not answering the question.
You'd be buzzing,
Would
right? I mean, I don't know on what.
Yeah.
Could I get drunk eating the rotten bananas?
You could get a feeling for sure.
You might get the same effect as being really drunk, which would be throwing up. So it's sort of like a ruined Ewok village banana farm.
Basically, yeah, it is like the remnants of walkways and like probably like a processing like station, you know what I mean? Which would not have been like a factory. It would have been like a hut, right? A small like little building. And you imagine, as you dig through, that probably there is a free port near here, or there was when this farm was here. And these people were farming here, and they would bring whatever they had to that free port. But time has worked its wages on this place. This didn't all just fall down today. It's been down here for longer. But I think, this was an acquisition role for you, Calathiel. And so I think, digging through like as you're piecing this little piece of history together, this little tableau of a lost farm, I think, you push aside some of the broken boards and splintered wood to find a piece of salvage, which I think I'm going to call out here as a harvesting scythe. I think that there is a big kind of like 2-armed, probably, like scythe, a harvesting scythe that is probably a little big on Calathiel, but like just in the realm of usability.
Okay. Big ass scythe. It's probably taller than me.
And so you said you got a twist here, which is that this should have a tag, and tags are something that all resources don't necessarily have to have, but can. And tags are kind of a mostly narrative way of modifying a resource or kind of characterizing it, right? And so some of the possible tags that salvage can have, just off the dome here, right? It could be a sturdy piece of salvage, which means that it clears an extra mark when it's used to repair damage to an aspect, track, or an injury. It could be an ornate item, which means it has far more worth than usual. Or it could be broken, almost useless for its intended purpose. And so do you have a feeling for like a tag that you want here? Because I know that you also have an interesting aspect that relates to finding salvage.
That's true. One of my aspects is the Master Salvager trait, which lets me add a positive tag of my choice to any salvage you require. So it's made it this far. Is there like something... you mentioned that the Tarnanas are really sticky, and that's almost like an obstacle of dealing with them, right? So would there be something special about the scythe that would kind of be specialized for Tarnanas that would maybe let it...
That's a fun one. Maybe...
It's like I'm trying to think of an equivalent to like being water repellent or something. Like it's not slowed by, or it's Krezerin resistant or something.
What if we use the word coated?
Coated?
Like
yeah,
it has
sure.
like a coating on the blade that makes it more efficient, or able to cut through sticky substances without being caught, right?
Yeah. I like that, and because it's not like we can go to the store and get a coating, or go to the store and buy a coating for it, but maybe it's like, you can see it in the metal. It's got this like Damascus steel or something, like it's just kind of hewn.
Yeah, there's like an oil sheen to it that makes it look surprisingly new and like usable compared to like I think there are other like so rusted they're no longer usable, like smaller tools here probably hanging around, right? Stuff that's just kind of like fallen into total disrepair, but something with the coating has maintained this scythe. So this is like a coated harvesting scythe.
Cool.
And so as a resource, that's a thing you have now. It is a thing you'll be able to use in the fiction, but also resources are things you can like then later break down for trade or to create new things. If you like this scythe enough, you could eventually use it to produce like a piece of gear that would be an aspect that would stick around.
Yeah, I think I'm going all in. Calathiel from here on out is going to be a banana harvester. This
We're shifting the entire focus of the season to be
The rest of the season's
about
gonna be
banana
pretty focused.
cultivation and farming and the best horticulture practices.
I said it before. There is literally an entire supplement that Felix wrote that is super sick, and listeners should check it out, which is the Wildsea Ship Garden supplement. And so if you wanted to play a campaign where you are a group of traveling farmers, not only is that like possible in the Wildsea, it's fucking encouraged. And I think that's dope.
Respect. That's sick. Have a whole supplement for
maybe
that.
we'll see
That's
some
so
of that
cool.
before the end of the season.
Listen, if you guys want to do gardening, I've got the supplement already. It's pretty cool. But this is a montage. Let's keep moving, right? I think there's, you guys discover this. You're stepping through it together. Reese, do you have a separate task you wanted to do during this montage, or are you also salvaging alongside Calathiel?
No, I think I'm just gonna follow Cal's lead. I don't really think. I think I am completely out of my element here. Make it clear.
I think it's like this is a teachable moment, right?
Yeah,
We're like
but
kind of.
I'm but like also like you need to remember. Not only am I not used to being like below the waves, I'm not used to being on top of the waves. You know, this is super weird. I feel a little bit sick to my stomach, if I'm being honest.
What about do you, as a word bearer, like how do you figure out whispers? Like can you sense whispers?
Well, I don't think that has anything to do with me being a word bearer. I think that it does have to do with, my lineage.
Mm-hmm.
How does one harvest whispers? Wow. We have not gone over this. I imagine I think you just have to listen. I think that whispers are out there to be heard as long as you're listening. And how you listen is I guess just depending on your level of focus. I wish there isn't like a wisdom roll to do. Unless wait, is there? No.
So speaking of which, let's get a roll for you here, because you're probably doing acquisition as well, right? You're also salvaging alongside Calathiel, who is kind of showing you the ropes, right? And so let's talk about what that looks like for Reese. Starting out with this acquisition roll, what edge is Reese using to try and also look for promising salvage down below the waves?
We'll do tides.
Tides make sense. That's you're especially if you're following Calathiel's lead, approaching it the same way Calathiel is doing makes sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so what skill are you using? You said
the skill I'm using hack. I'm kind of I'm hacking through. I've got a machete. Unless I need to acquire that.
It's not a weapon, right? It's not like a piece of gear that you have. But some kind of like cutting knife to like cut back vines is like a thing that you can have in the fiction, but you won't get any like advantages off of having it mechanically.
Sure.
So you're hacking. Is there anything else giving you an advantage here?
Is there anything giving me an advantage here?
I mean, Calathiel showing you the ropes. I think that could be the advantage here, right? You have someone guiding you.
Yeah, I think so.
I think Reese couldn't really help Calathiel because Reese is the teacher. Reese couldn't help Calathiel because Calathiel's a teacher, but as Calathiel is the teacher, I think Calathiel can help Reese. So I'd say, take one for advantage.
Watch out when you're striking at that kind of route. That's a rich, you could spill Kezrin every, yeah.
Yeah. And even pointing out like weak spots in boards as you're starting to get onto like the wooden platform.
Mm-hmm.
Now this here's a board, son.
Now you gotta strike it hard, son.
I said salvage. I said it's cargo, son. Cargo. Okay, let her rip.
How many am I rolling?
That is 3d6.
Boom. 2 of the... Wait, what the heck? There was a 2, a 6, and a 5? Yes. The 6... dice literally on the Wildsea Charsmith, like the dice were like on top of each other. That was like so weird. I was like, what's going on? Okay,
cool. So that is a 6 is a triumph. It is a full success. You gain a solid example of whatever resource you were looking for, untainted by waves or use or time. And I'm gonna put a twist on this here a little bit, not a literal game twist. But like a
Mitch twist.
A little Mitch twist, thank you. MT, TMTM. I think that you're hacking, and I don't know that you are finding a lot of salvage. I think that, like, Calathiel kind of found the most usable thing here, right? Which was this sturdy blade that had been coated. And it's like kind of the only thing that hasn't been lost below the waves or ruined by time and the effects of the Wildsea. But as you start hacking and clearing things away, this tableau starts to become clearer to you, Reese, right? This thing did fall from a rootquake some time ago, but it was not abandoned when it fell. I think you find, like, scraps of clothing, right? I think that there is, we don't have to get, like, the full camera on it, but I think maybe you start to lift a board, and there is, like, a skeletal hand underneath this wreckage. Insects skittering out from below there as you lift the board, right? And board drops. Yes.
What?
And as you're surveying this, like, scene, this, like, little tragedy in miniature on the Wildsea, you can hear it, right? You don't even realize you're listening for it until you are. And you have to strain your ears to hear it at first. But once you hear it, you can't stop hearing it, right? It's playing like a song in the back of your head, repeated quietly. This was the last harvest. And so I'm going to give you the whisper, the last harvest.
Hell yeah.
I don't know if it's like a thing you make clear that it's happening to you, but you've picked one up, right? These living words, this whisper, this kind of parasitic thought entity that exists on the Wildsea that are common enough that people know about them, right? It's not like like whispers are traded. They are things that there are ways to pull a whisper out of your own head and give it to someone else. They're a currency on the Wildsea as much as they are a mystery. And you've just picked one up, and I think there's like I don't know what the bodily sensation is exactly, but I imagine, it's strange, right? To have this living word worm its way into your own mind.
I think that it just depends on the whisper. Sometimes it might feel like getting into like a warm bath, and then other times it feels like someone's driving like an ice pick into your skull.
This one is like a weight settling on your chest. There's a heaviness to it, a melancholy.
Mm-hmm. I think maybe Reese kind of shudders. He goes like, a loud sort of maybe like a sobbing without sobbing kind of noise.
Mm-hmm. And unless you guys have like another moment there, I think we can bring the camera away, right? As Reese and Calathiel kind of spend their afternoon surveying the wreckage of the farms that used to be here. What is Hexam getting up to up in the ship?
Right. I guess with the aspect of like the montage, it's going to be, I guess, working kind of just on a project. And I think that is, he's like spore gathering, as this rootquake, rends trees and sends things into the air. Hex is collecting these spores from these different areas, or as part of a project to, see what can be learned from.
So let's take one step back. I like what you're putting down right there.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk a little bit first about what the project is. Because a project is much like long-term projects in Beam Saber or Blades in the Dark or Scum and Villainy. It is going to have its own track that you will mark off by working on it. And when you fulfill it, at the end of the project, you will kind of get a benefit of some kind. So, I know you're interested in exploring the relationship between weather and the rootquakes, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do we want to characterize, like, what's the kind of end goal of that project?
Well, I'm looking at it because, I have, with my drives, I have both communicate with a living storm on equal terms and craft a weapon that can take down a Leviathan. And I think that either one of those, I guess, it is using that drive as which is what this like project is working on. Maybe it's crafting a weapon that can take down a Leviathan. That this is part of research towards
I think we need to be a little bit more explicit at the start of like what the thing you're
what
working
the
on is.
project
You know what I
is,
mean?
okay.
As opposed to like a broad and general
okay.
goal. Like, what is the thing? You know, like materially, like what are you trying to get at, or like what are you trying to? You're trying to study. You know, like is this about like getting a device that like can use rootquakes to like can use weather to predict rootquakes, or vice versa, right? Like that's like kind of like I think more the realm we should be thinking about, right?
Right.
Like,
Okay. Then maybe like as these rootquakes happen, send spores up. It collects these spores, and maybe there is creating something that can sense these, like that is stays on deck. That like if it senses this, it can send a gives off some kind of signal, like, oh, I'm detecting these spores in the air. It might be something that is forthcoming, you know, like a early detection device. If that like
that's,
working
yeah,
on,
yeah, that I think is money, right? Like,
Okay,
like an early rootquake detection device.
Yeah, something that as these
Yeah,
it
that's
might
cool.
be coming, it sends these up into the air. This device catches them and goes, yeah, beep 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 beep. You know,
Yeah,
rootquake possibly incoming.
I like that. So I think that is let's say a 4-track project.
Okay.
And so we can create that on your character sheet in a second. Which is like like early rootquake detection system. All right, so that's there. And so let's talk about how you can work on a project. So if you don't want to roll, you could mark off a box just by spending some time working on it. Rolling a dice, right, is like a little riskier, but it's a way to make more progress on a project all at once, right? But it does come with the risk of you've rolled dice can lead to failure. Alternatively, you can spend resources on it if you have like resources that you think like will do something. I do think that you'll probably have to at some point spend a resource to like finish crafting this thing. You'll need materials, right?
Yeah.
Because it is a device. So at some point in this process, to finish it, you'll need to get materials that you can spend on it. But I guess the question, I think, to start, right, you said you were like getting out there and studying spores.
Yeah.
Do you want to risk the dice roll, or do you just want to give us a little flavor here for a single box?
Why not risk a dice roll? Why not? Let's do it. Let's see.
So yeah, I'm going to give you increased impact if you are going to roll dice here, which means you'll mark 2 boxes on this 4-box project if you're successful.
All right.
So let's talk about now we can come back around to what's the exact thing Hexam is doing up here while those other 2 are down below delving.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, so we start with edges, right?
Yes.
I guess this would be sharp, first off.
Cool. And sharps, we haven't used sharps yet. What does sharps mean?
So sharps is the edge of logic, wit, and planning. You're at your best when you can bring intelligence and preparation to bear, relying on the knowledge that your mind or tongue are sharper than any blade. Sharps is often used to solve problems, untangle complexities, design or create new objects, and outmaneuver others in verbal conflicts. So I think that is a great place to start with that. And then going forward, I think this is rattle, right? I guess.
Well, so what are you doing right now? Let's talk in the fiction. What's Hexam doing?
Yeah, I think it's collecting spores and in piping it through the instruments there on deck. It does give that kind of Richter scale. It's showing like the elevated levels of maybe it has something to do with like the Krezerin, that like how much is being given off in the air itself, like that it's showing like this much is being particulated into the air here, and you are seeing that like because of this we are seeing this percentage of Krezerin being lifted into the air in a way that like it doesn't other times. And
so this feels to me more like study than rattle.
Oh yeah, okay, that makes sense,
right? Because rattling is like when you're
creating
stuff, you're patching up the ship, you're using salvage to repair damaged gear, whereas studying is discovering evidence in the aftermath of an event, determining a pattern, flaw, or weakness.
gleaning information from cryptic notes and such.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it is more study then.
So that is 2d6 to start with. Is there anything that's giving you an advantage here?
I was going to say tool belt with the rattle hand, but that now that we think of it more as study, I think that I think we're kind of just flying by the seat of our pants with a little bit of this, just seeing what can be learned and taking what I get from that roll.
Yeah, then let's roll 2d6. Let's see what happens.
3 and a 1. Oh, good thing we rolled. Woo!
Okay, so a 3 and a 1 is what the game would call disaster. It is.
Woohoo!
That's what we call in the biz a huge fuck up.
Yeah, it is a failure. But this is a montage, right? We are not in like the full blown.
It's Daffy Duck's bill being blown to the back of his head.
I'm gonna make this very simple. I think you are still gonna mark one segment on your progress track, or your project track rather. It's a failure, but because it's a montage, I think it's like you've just managed to do as good as you would have done if you had not tried to risk it a little bit more, right? And I think what happens is, this is probably Hexam has to like, you're collecting these spores and these air currents that are getting gusted up. I imagine there's kind of like, you have to get out there and do that a little bit yourself, right?
Yeah.
There's not like a machine that can like collect them all for you. You haven't built that yet, right? And I think that this is like a, leaning out over the side of the ship, right? Mm-hmm. With like whatever your kind of collection device is. I don't know, your little like handheld like Hoover or whatever that's pulling in these spores. And as Hex is like leaning over, there's a soft judder of one of these rootquake aftershocks, and something fungal just below the treetop bursts with like a ripe, wet sound, and there is like a burst of spores that shoots up through the treetops, and I think coats Hexam's face. So you're gonna take 1 damage.
All right.
And you get your spores, but you get them in an unpleasant way, right?
Yeah, I have to scrape them off my face into.
Yeah. And so you're gonna take 1 damage here. And the way that this works, you will not take damage to your health bar or your hit points because you don't have those.
Right.
Instead, in the Wildsea, when you take damage, one of 2 things happens. If it's really bad damage or it's very particular damage, you'll take an injury, which will be its own kind of temporary aspect with its own progress bar that you will slowly fill by healing and getting better over time, but will negatively affect you in some kind of fashion depending on its nature. Alternatively, the way that works most of the time is that when you take damage, you are going to mark that much damage into one of your aspects, and that will be reflected as like, that aspect is in some way affected by the damage you have taken, whether that's a real injury or it's a physical degradation of gear or it's like a mental thing. It could be any of these, but you get to choose where that 1 damage goes, and then we will kind of in the fiction figure out like what that means, right?
Yeah. Do I get to pick that then?
You do. You get to pick where you take the damage. This is also 1 toxin damage. There are different types of damage in the game. Each kind of damage type has its own different description. There's blunt damage, keen, hewing, serrated, volt, blast, frost, salt is a type of damage. And different aspects will give some characters resistances or weaknesses to different types of damage. I don't think you have any of those, so it's just 1 damage plain. But it's up to you to tell us which of these is getting marked. Which of your aspects?
I think it's going to probably be 1 in tool belt. I think the spores, kind of coming up and getting in the eyes, like, and just the nature of the Wildsea, that it kind of burns. Like, I don't see super. Everything's a little bit blurry for a bit, and it's going to take a couple days of rinsing the eyes out to make sure that I can see and do fine detailed work or anything like that. So I'll take 1.
All right, so that is 1 out of the 2 tracks on your tool belt gear. When your tool belt gear is completely, when that aspect is fully marked out, when you've taken enough damage to fully fill that aspect's track, it will become unavailable to you until you heal that damage, right? Whatever this damage that is accumulated is, you no longer have that aspect of your character available to yourself. So you've marked one on the tool belt, but you have progressed your track. And, I think probably, Claremont, maybe like yanks Hexam back from the side, right, after seeing this. And I imagine he is helping you clean off, and probably helping you like look at some of these notes after the fact, right? There is like a little seismographic machine down in the lab that I think he's like comparing. You're starting to compare charts and things.
Yeah.
And I think as the sun starts to set, this is probably about when Calathiel and Reese get back to the ship.
Yeah. The bell rings twice as we tug the line to ascend.
And as the night kind of goes on, I think Ixtobor has made, right, like these like Tarnana like custard tarts, right? These like little like hand pies of the Tarnana custard.
He is good.
And I think this is kind of like when your party rests in a video game and you get like fast transition to night in the next morning, right? And then as the sun rises and the bell rings again, the journey is ever ceaseless on the Wildsea.
Oh, let me guess. What's for breakfast? Tarnanas again.
Probably. You guys have a lot of one thing. It's mixed in, right, with your other rations. You don't want to eat too many of these Tarnanas because they're also a valuable trading asset. But
Reminds me of that episode of Cowboy Bebop where they were like flushed with shiitake mushrooms.
Oh, yeah.
It was like for dessert was shiitake on ice.
yeah.
Well, then I think now that light is here, we set sail.